Let's start with this question. What can you expect to learn from this webinar today? You are going to have a better understanding of the solutions available to support people affected by cancer. Today, we will focus on support care centers close to the hospitals, and we are going to uncover the incredible work they do. They provide a whole range of services, from practical help to educational or emotional support, both for cancer patients and their family. We will be using the Maggie as an example. Maggie is a charity which has developed a renowned cancer support networks in UK and abroad over 25 years. We are very happy to have Andy Anderson from Maggie's with us today. Andy is going to explain us Maggie's model of support and its impact on patients and their family. After his presentation, we will share with you the pre-recorded interview of Professor Langedeck, chair of the radio-oncology from the University Medical Centers in Groningen, Netherlands. So we felt it was also important to gather the perspective from an oncologist. Before handing over to Andy, I will begin the session with an introduction, giving the context on why we are organizing this webinar and why we are supporting Cancer Care Support Program. My name is Françoise Vanek. I lead a new initiative on cancer patient program supported by IBA, and I will be your host for this session. And before starting the presentation of Maggie, I would like to provide an introduction about the purpose of this IBA Cancer Patients Program and share with you the origin of this webinar. Cancer is something that has touched many of us, our loved ones, friends, or colleagues. I have personally faced the challenges of cancer, and I realized that having cancer is much more than undergoing heavy medical treatment. Most people do not see or imagine all hidden aspects of the cancer. I was obsessed by the same recurring questions. How can I increase my chances of recovery? What is the best treatment for me? What will be the side effects? I had to make crucial choices for my life in a hurry. I needed education. At home, I was just as lost. I was consumed by an incredible fear, feeling overwhelming pains. I'm a mom. How to take care of my kids? How to regain my self-image? I needed support, and I couldn't find any. I had heard about La Villa, a cancer center in Otigny, Belgium, but I didn't know them very well. The first time I passed through their door, I felt like stepping into a cozy cocoon. The open access, the warm atmospheres, the sense of dedication of the staff, a break from the stress of the hospital. I felt hurt. I could share tips with other patients, discuss with psychologists, together with one of my kids, learn to letting go with mindfulness. This global support was very impactful for my quality of life and my treatment outcome. This personal experience has opened my eyes to the value of comprehensive support. This structure should be available to everyone, no exceptions. This has led to the creation of this webinar with a dual objective. First, the webinars aim to raise awareness about the crucial needs for comprehensive support. Second, they seek to provide information and share best practices to educate participants on specific topics. With these webinars, our ultimate goal will be to promote and support the expansion of patients' programs on a global scale, making them accessible to all patients regardless of their backgrounds or location. This educational program will delve into the key challenges of support centers, addressing topics as setting up centers, fundraising campaigns, or day-to-day operation. We know that care centers may differ on their operational approaches and models, or aim will be to provide valuable insight that could be applied in different settings. I would also like to disclose today that these webinars are part of a broader program. This is an exclusive opportunity for me to preview a more global philanthropic initiative supported by IBA. I am convinced that in addition to medical and technology advancements, humanizing care is also crucial in the fight against cancer. We believe that we can further contribute to the development of a more comprehensive care by leveraging IBA valuable assets or skills. or international reach, or connection to major hospitals, or partners, and or passion and dedication to make a positive impact. This project is at the crossroads of IBA societal programs involving patients, customers, employees, the society. This perfectly complements IBA's mission to protect her hands and save lives. So now we will move on to the central focus of our webinars, the Maggies. I'm going to give the floor to our guest, Andrew Anderson from Maggie. He is going to explain Maggie's model and its impact on patient and family. Andy will be available to address any questions you may have during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much, Andy, to be here with us today. I hand over the floor to you.
After my cancer diagnosis, it felt like my whole life was crumbling.
You just feel at a complete loss. You're chasing, and there's just nothing you can do.
Usually people get to think about the future in their own time, but not me. My treatment started on my 17th birthday.
The whole concept of being that close to cancer feels unknown and scary.
It's a fear of family, not being with them.
As soon as you walk into Maggie's, it changed your perspective of everything.
It feels like a little oasis.
It became a home from home for me and my family.
Maggie's has helped me to find some stability in amongst what's the mad storm.
I've been given the skills to cope with that fear and that worry.
You feel lighter and clearer about how you're going to engage with the outside world again.
My way to live with cancer is with Maggie's.
Our way to live with cancer is with Maggie's.
My way to live with cancer is with Maggie's.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Francois, for the invitation to be able to speak today. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak after the short film that you've just seen, which really gives an indication of the flavour of how powerful Maggie's is for people who come to visit the centres. My name's Andy Anderson, and I'm an oncology nurse. I've worked in cancer care for over 30 years, and I've been with Maggie's for the last 23 years. I'm really keen to be able to share with you this afternoon just the brilliance of Maggie herself and what an innovator and a person to be able to make change she was, not only for her own sake, but also for her family and for other people, but also then how as an organisation we've continued to work to be able to give people the best opportunity to get the best access to the support that not only they require, but also their family members as well. So really importantly, this is Maggie. Maggie was a mid-50s-year-old woman who was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. She was married with teenage children, and she was really brilliantly supported by the National Health Service. Her doctors, her nurses, the hospital teams supported her medically extraordinarily well. But she recognised that within her treatment, she and her family needed more than they were able to provide. And that wasn't a criticism of what they were doing within the hospital, but there was a recognition that within hospital spaces, a lot of complicated issues that are about self-empowerment, that are about taking control, that are about feeling calm and holding a sense of well-being are very difficult to achieve in that very busy clinical space. So her keenness within her diagnosis and her treatment was to make a difference. And in the midst of a very complicated stem cell transplant for her diagnosis, she worked really hard with her own oncologist, her oncology nurse, Laura Lee, who is now our chief executive, and the hospital team to think about providing something that could be different. Again, importantly, not just based on her own needs, but on the needs of her fellow patients within the hospital space. She spoke to other people who were wrestling with their own cancer diagnosis, who were equally saying that they were finding it difficult to find the support that they needed to look at understanding or expressing the emotions that they felt. And she wanted to do this to be able to champion not only herself, not only her family, but also the needs of those other people she met in clinic areas or in the ward spaces. So this became the blueprint. Maggie, talked about the need for thoughtful lighting, the view out of a space to birds and sky and trees, a space that could allow you to take time to restore, to consider, to ask questions, to challenge, but also to be still and to be inspired by other people who are in the middle of their own circumstances. And she talked about that sense of welcoming, a reassuring space, a place that had a domestic feel about it, but that also had an inspiring space to be able to help that sense of control, give that sense of questioning, allow that sense of challenge, and allow people to be able to find a way of supporting themselves and their families as best they possibly could. So we've used that blueprint as a model of cancer care and cancer support and grown it into now a UK-wide national organisation with 24 centres across the UK and 3 centres internationally. And over the last 14 years, we've been working with international partners and have 3 built centres and are working with 2 other organisations, one in the Netherlands and one in Norway, to be able to develop our 4th and 5th international centres while continuing to work in the UK to make sure that we provide the services in the UK also. So this is Maggie's Edinburgh. This is the centre that I've worked at for the last 23 years. I'm incredibly proud as a nurse to have worked in this really remarkable and special space. And really importantly, it's a centre that has Maggie's fingerprints all over it. Maggie worked very hard with Richard Murphy, the architect for this space, to make sure it transformed from an old stable building into an inspiring and uplifting, beautiful space for people to be able to step away from the hospital and to consider what their needs might be. What you can't see from this image is about 20 metres to the left is a really big cancer centre, outpatient chemotherapy, radiotherapy, inpatient services, bone marrow transplant. But what this image shows is an image of a garden and a domestic sized space that allows people to make that shift from being a patient in the hospital to being a human being at Maggie's. Importantly, our programme of support is something that we've worked really hard on with people who've come to the centre, but also with other cancer professionals, and based it on all the psychological research that there is. But it's a very simple framework. It's a framework that welcomes people at any stage, with any diagnosis, for any reason, to be able to come to the centre, whether that's at point of diagnosis, whether that's going through treatment, whether that's looking at recuperating from treatment, or dealing with complicated issues to do with more advanced disease, or if people have experienced loss. Anybody can come to the centre. That's an individual with a diagnosis, family members, friends, colleagues, and really importantly, oncology staff. Increasingly, we see more healthcare professionals coming to Maggie's for support to help themselves continue to provide brilliant support within the NHS. The service is a drop-in facility, so you don't need an appointment. You can just walk in, and you can come as often as you wish for as long as you wish, and it's a free of charge service. As a voluntary sector organisation, we raise the money to make sure that all of the support that we provide is free, because many people who come to Maggie's are not in a position to be able to pay for the support that they need. Everybody who comes to the centre has access to any element of the programme, so you can just come in to use it as a restful, restorative space, or you can come for more intensive individual, couple, family, group, course, workshop sessions, depending on your needs. And as I said a moment ago, we've got 24 centres throughout the UK and 3 centres internationally, with more planned in the UK and importantly more planned internationally. So the programme of support is provided by healthcare professionals. So I'm an oncology nurse. My colleagues are either oncology nurses or therapy radiographers, clinical psychologists, but also importantly people who work alongside to provide really important practical support as well, our benefits advisors who help translate the complicated world of financial support in the midst of a diagnosis, and then sessional staff who provide advice on healthy eating, exercise, and also some of the expressive arts to be able to give people a different way of being able to navigate their process through their diagnosis. Importantly, one of the key things of Maggie's is that we have a high level of healthcare professional who works within the organisation. generally nurses with significant experience of oncology care, and importantly, supportive colleagues who enhance and broaden and deepen the quality and the nature of the support that we offer within the centres. All of our peer support is facilitated, so all the groups, courses, workshops are facilitated by the healthcare professionals who work within the centre to be able to maximise the safety, security, and also to be able to look at the issues that people need. Although we facilitate the sessions, it's not sessions with fixed agendas. It's for the agenda of the group and the agendas of the individuals to be able to look at what's most important, what's most pressing, and what's most greatest need at that point for that individual or for that group. What Maggie's does is unique. It's really important to be able to consider what we've been able to achieve across the UK, but also internationally. Importantly, there are no time limits to visits. People can come to the centres for as long as they wish, and particularly for people with more complex diagnoses, extended disease treatment plans, complicated longevity of dealing with metastatic disease means that people have very extensive cancer experiences, and our desire is to be able to be there for them as they need us, whenever they need us. It's important also that those services are tailored to the needs of the individual, that when people come to the centre, they've got the opportunity to ask for what's specific to their circumstances, to their family dynamic, to their family structure, and important to think about what we might be able to do to help them directly, but also how we collaborate with others to make sure that we can provide those services. It's a team of highly experienced, highly professional individuals with a wide range of skills under one roof. So it's a multidisciplinary team working very closely together. And therefore, there isn't a long referral process. If you walk into the centre today, you can be introduced to an oncology nurse with 30 years experience immediately, and then be introduced to a clinical psychologist if you want to make an appointment with them or there's a need. You can sign up for the group or the course that might be starting the week after. You can speak to the benefits advisor as you are in the centre that day. And importantly, you can do all of that in a beautifully uplifting, wonderful space immediately adjacent to the hospital. So the proximity to the hospital is really important. People don't have to make another journey, get in their car, get on another bus to go find us. As soon as you walk out of the cancer centre, we're a visible resource. And importantly, as I've said, the space is entirely different to the hospital. It's designed to be a really uplifting, inviting, warm and welcoming environment. The support is free, with no referral required, although many people are signposted to us by their healthcare professionals or by other family members. You can just choose to come to the centre when you need us, how you need us. And we work really closely with the NHS. We're a key supporter of the NHS to provide psychosocial support for people affected by cancer, and we work very closely with our NHS partners. And importantly, one of our uniquenesses is to have this network of international centres where there's been an enormous shared learning. Our ability to be able to learn from our colleagues in Hong Kong, Japan, and also in Barcelona has been tremendous. You know, we are expert in what we do, but we're always keen to be able to grow our expertise and to be able to collaborate with other brilliant experts to make sure that what we're doing is the best that people can possibly receive. The complementing of NHS services is really important. Since we started, we've worked very, very closely with the NHS. Maggie worked with the chief executive of the hospital, her own oncologist, her own nurse, to make sure that this support was provided. And that close working relationship is really important. Our keenness is to make sure that everybody who's coming to the oncology unit is signposted to Maggie's and that we can offer support if and when the individual might choose. Our focus is primarily on psychological, social and emotional support for people and supporting them and their families through the complexity of the NHS's treatment plans. We know that there's a huge increase in the cancer population and people living with cancer living much longer, and our desire is to be able to be an available resource for all of those people as they need us. And our ambition continues to remain to be an available resource at every cancer centre throughout the UK, and for us to be able to support other organisations to think about providing the support that's required at their own cancer centres. Our architecture is really important. Maggie was a landscape designer and a garden designer, Very importantly, Charles Jenks was an architectural critic, and the built environment was fundamentally important to both of them. The stifling impact the hospital had on Maggie, she described as likely to kill her as her cancer diagnosis. And what she wanted was these beautiful, bright, uplifting spaces to be able to give her a sense of inspiration, to give her a sense of future, but also importantly, just to feel calm, just to feel safe, and just to feel comfortable. And the feedback we get from people who come to the centre is that the space inside and outside the building is an essential component of the support that they receive. This very highly professionally delivered service is wrapped up in this beautiful physical space, both inside and outside, and it's an essential component of Maggie. This environment allows us to do very complicated things in supporting people. So the issues that people bring to Maggie's, from my experience, are really interestingly different to the issues they brought to me as a cancer nurse in the hospital. As a nurse in the hospital, it became obvious to me that they were telling me what they thought I needed to know based on their clinical treatment and their treatment pathway. But when people come to Maggie's, they talk about the things that are important to them as a human being. The types of issues that we talk about within these amazing spaces are living with the after effects of cancer, the complexity of cancer itself, but also the complexity of cancer treatment, dealing with long-term cancer-related issues, whether that's to do with pain, neuropathy, fatigue, some other complexities to do with the physical impact of surgery. Also importantly, the primary space to be able to come and talk about the emotional impact of that diagnosis. How has that made you feel? How has it left you feeling in terms of sense of vulnerability, sense of overwhelm, the complexity that might come in terms of relationship impact, sense of change of self, sense of confidence, and those important elements of transition for people as they've been diagnosed from that state of shock back into that sense of confidence, of well-being, and sense of positivity. Excuse me. Regaining confidence and identity is a combination of things for a lot of people. Some of that is about confidence and sense of self, in terms of body image and sensuality, sexuality, but also confidence in cognitive function, that cognitive rehabilitation, that physical rehabilitation, and developing stamina again. And again, that sense of rehabilitation that Maggie's offers helps people with that transition back to health when there's often quite an abrupt ending to treatment within hospital plans. Helping people to live with uncertainty. Still, the majority of people we support often have a complicated paradigm of their understanding of cancer, and trying to believe that their treatment can be of curative intent can often be a challenging process. So helping people to really engage with the language that the clinician has used, to really believe it, to know that it's appropriate to invest in health and well-being, and to know that it's appropriate to invest in a sense of future. Sexuality and fertility are very complex subjects, and often the complexity means that they're not raised within hospital spaces. Our desire is to make sure that those are very normal, healthy, easy subjects to be able to raise, even though they come with a lot of emotional content. So our specialists have a confidence in that. We work with colleagues who have a specialist expertise in those areas and give people the space to be able to name that, not only on their own, but also within the group spaces that we recognise, to give people that confidence in being able to utilise a group space to look at complicated issues. Family communication and relationships are really important to us at Maggie's, and we provide a number of sessions that are specific to supporting younger children, helping them to be able to understand what's happening to mum or dad, and importantly also helping couples to be able to think about how they support one another through the complexity of a diagnosis. And then returning to work, returning to life, living with and beyond a cancer diagnosis is a complicated phenomenon, helping people to negotiate with their line manager, helping people to pace their recovery, helping people to see the value in being able to invest in that sense of future and being able to grow a confidence in that sense of future, often is really enhanced by the conversations they've had with other people, but also because of the support that we as professionals offer within the centres. These are examples of that, the kitchen table, the group space, the open space, the sense of alongsideness, the sense of togetherness that Maggie's can offer, purely because of the building space, but also because of the way in which the programme support facilitates that openness, that sense of alongsideness and the sense of camaraderie within this space. Maggie talked about just how challenging it was to be in a hospital where she was in a single room, not able to speak to other people who were going through very similar experiences, and her desire was to meet others and to have that shared experience. And that's what you see in these images. So importantly, our centres, this is a map of where we are within the UK and our international partners. Development continues across the UK, and as I said earlier, our keenness is to make sure that everybody has access to the brilliance of Maggie's. These are some images of our international partners, and delighted to be able to say that the Groningen site is now on site, and hopefully by the end of this year, early next year, will be our 4th international centre. And this is an image of our Glasgow centre, just that sense of peace and tranquility, the inside being outside, the outside being inside, green space, natural light, togetherness and calm. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present, and thank you for the time you've taken to include us in this. I'll be really keen to answer any questions at the end of today's webinar. Many thanks.
So thank you, Andy, for this amazing experience. It's truly inspiring. So now that we know a little bit more about what a Maggie is, we will move on to a pre-recorded interview with Professor Langendijk, Chair of Oncology at the University Medical Centers in Groningen, Netherlands. So they are in the process of building some Maggies next to the radiotherapy centers. I felt it would be very interesting to also share with you a medical professional standpoint. So let's listen to the insight from Professor Langendijk. He sheds light on the benefits that both patients and the hospitals can gain from the close proximity of a support centers like Maggie's.
Well, if I look to UMCG cancer patients in general, we of course in the UMCG have a program for supportive care, for all kind of forms of supportive care for cancer patients that receive their cancer treatment at UMCG. But this is a little bit different. So here patients can just go if they like to do. They don't need a referral to go there. Also, the whole concept is different. And we think that this program of the Maggie Center is more complementary to the care that we can provide to our cancer patients. If I look to, in particular, to those patients that are treated with proton therapy, I think there are 2 categories. We have the category of patients that would have been treated here at UMCG, also when they would not receive proton therapy, but we also have a considerable proportion of patients that come from other centers, and some of them also stay here, for instance, during the week, and then for 5 or 6 weeks, depending on what kind of treatment they receive. And among them, there are all the pediatric patients that have that. And the idea would be that the Maggie Center here in Groningen will be located just next to the proton therapy center, so that also the accessibility for our proton therapy cancer patients is very close. And there will also be specific programs directed to the needs of patients that stay here for a longer period of time during their treatment. Well, as you know, it becomes more and more difficult to provide all the care and all the supportive care that patients need during their cancer treatment, but also after their cancer treatment. And the idea that we have as board of the Comprehensive Cancer Center at the UMCG is that the program that will be provided by the Maggie Center is very complementary to the program that we can offer as UMCG. And that is really an added value. Also, the concept is different, of course, than we have at UMCG. As I said, patients do not need a formal referral; they can just walk in. It will be run by volunteers mainly. So the whole concept is different, and it should be something which is very easy to go to for our patients.
It's very great to hear this positive synergy between care center and the oncology centers like Maggie's in Groningen. A change is occurring, empowering the hospital to provide additional services tailored to the diverse needs of individuals undergoing cancer treatment. In a dream world, we should have 1 cancer support centers to each oncology centers. So we are coming to the end of this webinar. We hope this webinar has given you a better understanding of cancer support centers and the importance of cancer patient support. So now it's time for the Q&A session. So I remind you to use the Q&A button and not the chat button. So Andy is going to address all the questions you could have. So we have already received a lot. We will make the follow-up afterwards if we could not cover all today. So first, how many patients do you welcome on average per day?
So that depends on each centre, Francois. So all of our cancer centres in the UK have different sizes. And at the Maggie's Edinburgh, where I've worked, we would say that we would see around about 100 to 120 people per day. But that's with a cancer centre that sees around about 4,500 people a year. Within a smaller centre, like a centre in District General Hospital, we might expect to see about 50 people a day. But in our biggest centres, we would be looking to see about 120 to 130 people per day, yes.
Okay. Another one, do Maggie centres offer housing services?
No, we don't. It's a non-residential service, and we're not focused on direct care, but for a number of people for whom they may have challenge with accommodation, we would work with agencies local to the hospital to be able to find accommodation for them. And we've had a number of volunteer resources to be able to offer that to, and we've worked with a couple of agencies to find reduced cost accommodation. But Maggie's isn't an accommodation service. It's very much a during the day service alongside outpatient based services, providing that psychosocial support that we've discussed already.
Okay, so you are supporting visiting patient logistics, but you are not making the housing services.
That's exactly right. We would support them and try and assist in them finding it, but we don't provide it ourselves.
Do your centers support palliative cancer patients?
Yes, we do. So anybody can come to Maggie's for any reason. So it's not uncommon for somebody to come to Maggie's not having a cancer diagnosis, but having questions or being fearful about a possible diagnosis. The majority of people who come to the centre are dealing with an active diagnosis and having active treatment and looking to fully recover. But it is entirely appropriate that we support people with non-curable diagnoses. And as I summarised in the presentation earlier on, for a lot of that population, they're living much longer with very complex diagnoses because of the improvement in cancer care and cancer treatments. So we'll support people for many years often in relation to an ongoing diagnosis, but definitely around palliative care and end-of-life issues. And very importantly, alongside that, Francois, supporting family members. And we would continue to provide a bereavement support service for anybody who had experienced loss as well.
Could you tell us how are patients informed about Maggie's? Do hospitals advise them to visit Maggie's?
Yes, it's hugely important for us that we have a very close working relationship with the hospital that we're based at. And all of the hospitals that we work very closely with see us as a crucial asset in the support of the people that they're supporting in the hospital. So our hope would be that 100% of people who are newly diagnosed, Maggie's is mentioned to, and that they're encouraged to be able to make use of the centre. But as was highlighted earlier on, it is a choice to come to the centre, and it is important that people come at the time that's right for them. It's not uncommon that people who are encouraged to come very early in their diagnosis might feel a little overwhelmed at the thought of coming to the centre. So it's when they choose to come that's the right time for them to come. So signposting is primarily from the hospital, from their community, doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, but also family members or friends or colleagues. There's a lot of people for whom they walk across the front door of Maggie's with their hand held by a very close friend who knows the centre because of another reason. So they're being supported by a community around them to provide that support.
And so is Maggie's linked to a specific local hospital, or it's access free for all? And can patients come from various hospitals?
So we are located at a specific hospital, but you can come from anywhere to that hospital. There's a good example of somebody I was supporting earlier this year. He lives in Edinburgh. but his mother was having treatment in Manchester, which is about 4 hours drive away. So she would use Maggie's Manchester and he would use Maggie's Edinburgh, even though he wasn't having anything to do with the Edinburgh Cancer Centre. He was able to come to Maggie's Edinburgh. So your location or your attachment to the hospital doesn't preclude you from being able to come to Maggie's Centre. If you need that support, it's available when you need it.
Okay. How do you support, if you support pediatric cancer patients?
So the centre is very much open to anybody affected by any cancer diagnosis. In our experience in the UK, paediatric oncology centres are very well supported in terms of social work support, counselling support, psychological support. What's been interesting for us, though, is that often we see the parents of a child with a cancer diagnosis where there are complex issues in terms of family dynamic or where there have sadly been experiences of loss. We definitely support lots of children for whom they have a parent or a grandparent or a family member with a cancer diagnosis, helping them to understand what might be happening to mum or dad or a grandparent, giving them the opportunity on a day when the hospital isn't busy to walk across to the hospital to see a radiotherapy machine, to see a proton machine, to see chemotherapy services, to try and demystify what might be happening for that family member. So children are very much a part of all of the Maggie centres, yes.
And do you experience a balanced proportion of male and female patients visiting Maggie's? And if not, is this an issue that you are addressing one way or another?
It's a very important question. It continues to be the case that men are underrepresented at Maggie's, but in our more established centres, like the Edinburgh Centre, which is the oldest of the centres, 40% of the centre visitors are male. So there's in the UK, it's a 50-50 split, like most countries. So we are underrepresenting, but we've worked year on year to make sure that the centre feels accessible to men of all ages and all diagnoses. That's partly a cultural shift, but it's also making sure that some of the culture of healthcare professionals in terms of their prejudgment about men's support needs changes, and that they encourage everybody, men, female, male, female, and non-binary population to be able to come to Maggie's for whatever reason might be. So our keenness is to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to come, and it's our responsibility to make sure that the centres feel accessible to everybody and for everybody.
Thank you. Another topic, what is the economical models of Maggie's?
Yeah, so we are an independent charitable organisation. So when Maggie first had the idea to develop a support service, she and the foundation, our family, had very generously gifted money to start the organisation. Each centre is independently managed from a fundraising point of view. So we, as a charitable organisation, raise money to make sure that the centres sustain, and also importantly to make sure that nobody who comes to the centre has to pay for that service. As I said in my presentation, there are many people who come to our centres who are financially significantly disadvantaged, and their cancer diagnosis makes that even more complicated for them. So it's essential that there is no sense of payment, but it is also essential that the community of people who make use of the centre and grow to love Maggie's also become the resource to continue to sustain the organisation. We take full responsibility for building the building, for staffing the centres, and for providing all of the ongoing support. Up until very recently, we've had no government funding, but in Scotland, we recently received a grant from the Scottish Government to be able to provide a programme within the centres looking at prehabilitation, so getting people ready for their treatment. And we're keen to be able to see how that continues to develop. Our keenness is also, though, to be able to be a very independent, anonymous resource that people can come to independently of the hospital. So there is a benefit in being entirely financially independent, but at the same time, that creates a challenge for us organisationally to raise the money to provide the service we wish. And our keenness as an organisation is to grow the amount of centres, particularly in the UK, to make sure that every cancer centre in the UK has a service that Maggie's can support them.
So you mentioned that access to Maggie's is free for the patient. Yes. So how long it is the case? During the treatment or after the treatment?
Forever. The service is
Okay.
free from the moment you step through the door to a year later, to 5 years later, to 10 years later. Because we increasingly know, as I mentioned, that many people who are dealing with an advanced cancer diagnosis will be on chronic therapy, often for many, many years, which also often impacts their capacity to work, which then challenges their financial circumstances. It's really important that we continue to provide those services for free for as long as the individual needs them. So as an organization, our responsibility is to make sure that continues to be free, and it's our responsibility to raise the money in the background so that nobody ever has to pay for that service.
So, and I have an additional question related to that topic: is if it is unlimited, how do you manage the capacity?
Yeah, it's a very important point, and I think there's a very natural process for the majority of people who come to Maggie's, particularly the population who are having treatment for curative intent, to come at point of crisis of diagnosis, to then look at sustaining themselves through treatment and a period of time after treatment's completed in terms of that recuperation and recovery. But then there's a very natural, healthy step away from the centre, maybe a year and a half after completion of treatment, when somebody feels reintegrated, when they feel they've gained confidence in self and health and well-being again. So it's appropriate for them to be able to step away from the centre. But the population for whom they have a more complex diagnosis, they may continue to come in peaks and troughs in and around what's happening with their diagnosis. And the question is appropriate. It needs to be that the centres feel a sense of calmness, the sense of energy and life, but it is important that we're not overwhelmed in terms of the volume of people. So we've tried to make sure that the model we have suits the size of the cancer centre that we're adjacent to, that each of the Maggie centres have enough capacity and enough space to be able to offer that beautiful space, but also a space that accommodates a large volume of people.
Regarding the program, how are Maggie's program designed? Are they based on some kind of impact analysis? You also talk about the drop-in. Could you explain a little bit more?
Of course. So yes, very much all of the program is founded on long-term psychological research. Psychological research alongside a cancer diagnosis is thankfully now 30, 40, 50 years old, and we understand what the traumatic impact is, but we also understand how best to facilitate support associated with that. Our support is very complex in its psychological and psychotherapeutic intent, but the structure of Maggie's and the program is very simple. It's often about just making sure that the centres are staffed by very experienced professionals with appropriately relevant skills, and importantly, that we give an opportunity for people to name themselves, to name their story and to name their experience, but often to do that alongside other people, so that the process of group courses, workshops, support groups are an essential component of what we do, but all facilitated groups, and also giving people ways of understanding how best to manage, how best to cope, whether that's at a functional, practical level in terms of finance, whether it's at a health and well-being in terms of exercise and nutrition, but also whether it's about psychosocial issues to do with adjustment and transition. So very much around established psychological research. And then every program we run has an evaluation program as part of it. Every year we do an audit within each centre, and every 3 years we have a triennial external audit where external professionals come and give us feedback on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And importantly, there's a very important interview of centre visitors for them to be able to give their feedback. All of that wraps around, so that structured program wraps around drop-in. So you can just walk into a centre at any point. And it's important that the role of the cancer support specialist, which is a role I've fulfilled, is to be able to be as available as possible for that new person who's walked in, to be able to summarize what's happening for themselves, to ask some questions, and then also to ask questions about how Maggie's might best support them. So it's constantly trying to create the flexibility of being available for somebody who's newly come in, providing a structure of support for the population who've come in already and are coming back to program, and then also this beautifully uplifting, stimulating, fantastic space that the centres are on.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. Do you offer integrative medicine, such as Qigong or I don't know, Reiki?
We involve elements that are supportive of health and well-being. I would say we don't provide alternative therapies, but very much supportive approaches. So yes, things like Qigong, yoga, exercise, and gentle exercise and activities. We haven't necessarily included other types of alternative approaches within Maggie's because we try to be very much an evidence-based organization. But it is important that those softer areas that often aren't able to be easily integrated into hospital care are what Maggie's can offer. So that reference to creative approaches that I mentioned earlier on, looking at therapeutic artwork, looking at creative writing as different vehicles to be able to give people a sense of confidence in self and a way of expressing their experience or understanding their experience in a different way. So yes, we would include elements that enhance talking approaches and elements that give people a capacity to both express, understand, and to feel a sense of dynamic change with.
Are you making some remote support for the patient?
Yeah, so that was really accelerated for us in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. Up until that point, the vast majority of the support that we offered was face-to-face within a centre. We would do telephone support, but primarily described ourselves as a face-to-face resource. We had to then shift into the digital world very rapidly. So within 24 hours, most centres shifted to an online platform service, and we've been able to maintain that with some centres. So one of the centres that's done that very effectively is Maggie's Highlands. It's based in Inverness, and it has a huge geographical reach. And that geography often makes it difficult for individuals to easily access the centre. But because of now this new platform of remote support, they were able to access it from the comfort of their own home. So we've sustained that model to an extent, but our desire is to be able to provide services within our centres. The building enhances the support that people experience within the centre, but it is important that for some people for whom they're physically unable to make it to the centre, we are able to reach out to them in the way that they need.
Okay, thank you. So I see the time is running, so we have still a lot of questions, so we will make the follow-up afterwards. So we will send you the reply to all your questions with Andy. So thank you very much, Andy. Thank you so much for the huge participation of all the attendees. Thank you for your great involvement, Andy, into the Maggie's. So I hope that we are all now convinced by the crucial needs of comprehensive care support for all patients. So there are more webinars to come. The next webinar on cancer patient program is planned in the autumn. So we will keep you posted. So in the meantime, if you have any questions regarding the Maggie's or other insights, so do not hesitate to contact us. And if you are involved into cancer patient programs, so do not hesitate. So I would be very happy to get in touch with you. So thank you all. Thank you, Andy. And I wish you a great evening, a great afternoon, or a great morning, depending on where you are in the world. Goodbye and stay tuned. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.